suspect!
Coming to get you, Bobber.
Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the fifth movie in the Hellraiser franchise called Hellraiser Inferno. Now there is going to be spoilers here guys, so if you haven't seen it, if you want, don't watch the review. But if you don't mind, or if you have seen it, then continue watching. So with the rapid decline at this point in the Hellraiser franchise, I wasn't looking forward to Hellraiser Inferno. And like I said before, I haven't seen these movies and this is the first time watching it. So I didn't have any high hopes at all for Hellraiser Inferno after what happened with Hellraiser Bloodline. But there was something about this film that was intriguing, and that was the director. It was Scott Derrickson, who directed The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and he also directed Doctor Strange. So there was potential for a good direction in this film, as well as the cast as well. We had James Remar, we had Nicholas Turturro, and we had the main character, Craig Sheffer, who was also in Nightbreed. So you had that kind of Clive Barker connection with the cast members. So I was looking forward to it for some reason because the cast was solid and so was the director. This was played out like a detective style movie, and it was narrated by Joseph, who was played by Craig Sheffer. He's this sleazy and dodgy cop. Now, before I begin this review, and I'll probably mention this throughout the rest of the reviews, the scripts for Hellraiser Inferno, Part 5, Part 6, Part 7 and Part 8, I believe, the 4 movies were written not as Hellraiser movies at all, and that's why when you watch these films, they're more detective style films than horror movies. They've just got Pinhead and Hellraiser plopped into the script at the last minute by Dimension. So these movies weren't meant to be Pinhead or Hellraiser movies. They were just detective movies that just shoehorned Pinhead in, and that's what I'll get to as well, because you don't see a lot of Pinhead in these movies because they're not supposed to be Pinhead movies. They're just these detective style films. So I was watching it and I was intrigued because I was watching it from a detective movie standpoint, and it was interesting. The Joseph connection to Pinhead was he bullied a kid in school that he finds later on in life dead with the puzzle box in his possession, and just like Joseph being that sleazy guy, he takes the puzzle box and he opens it, and then he becomes the main character to try and defeat Pinhead. This is where Scott Derrickson comes into play with his good direction, as he really amps up this whole nightmare phase that Joseph's going through. After he opens up the box, he gets these visions and these nightmares, and the look of there is CGI in this film, but the look of the Cenobites and the way they become the way they are is very creative and very nightmarish. Being a sleazy cop, he ends up sleeping with this random girl in a hotel room, and she opens up the box and she gets killed, and he doesn't know what happens to her, and that's where the investigating begins. But he also doesn't want to tell anyone apart from his partner, who's played by Nicholas Turturro. He wants to cover it up, so we've now got this cover up story, and he's investigating to try and clear his name. Joseph's now on the hunt for the engineer, and throughout his journey he's seeing things that aren't there. And this is all obviously playing tricks on his mind throughout the entire movie. Someone or something is leaving children's fingers at the scenes of all the crimes, and it is disturbing, but it feels like that. It's obviously not on the same level, but it feels like David Fincher's Seven. It's going that kind of angle, which it was interesting because I kept forgetting it was a Hellraiser movie. I kept forgetting about Pinhead. So even though Pinhead wasn't in the movie a lot, I didn't mind because I was too invested in this detective story. Joey also thinks that all of this is in his head, so he wants to go and see his doctor to explain to him what's happening, maybe try and get an answer for the things that are happening to him, because he doesn't think or doesn't believe that the puzzle box has got anything to do with it. This is where the script kind of gets shoehorned around, and we find out the engineer is Dr. Gregory, played by James Remar, and that's when the Cenobite, the Pinhead story, comes into the movie. Had there not been any Hellraiser movies before this, I think the story with the Hellraiser talk in the film and Pinhead, it would have made sense, but because of what we got before, this movie didn't make any sense whatsoever, and you can tell that it wasn't supposed to be a Hellraiser movie to begin with, but at the same time I was still intrigued. Something I loved about this film was the finale, and it was so simple. After he thought he won, he then got to a point where he woke up again to where he was in the hotel room, and the film is telling us that he's living hell. He's going to go through this time and time again, and that's basically Pinhead has won. You know, he's in hell and he's going to suffer for the rest of his life, or whatever it is you call it, because he doesn't have a life anymore. And that in of itself is a complete nightmare, something you wouldn't wish on anyone. So the finale for me was not really horror, it was more psychological. It was like a psychological hell that Joseph found himself in at the end of the movie. And I think the finale itself was pretty brilliant. I think as a franchise, this film was a welcome change to what hell could look like, depending on who you are as a person in real life. So with that lesson learned in the movie, it was completely different from the first 4 Hellraiser movies. Like I said before, this is probably the movie with the most CGI in a Hellraiser film so far. And the CGI use wasn't bad. We got to a point where the CGI was looking decent at this point, but with Scott Derrickson being a good director, and with Craig Sheffer being also that face of Clive Barker and Nightbreed, anytime we see those practical effects with Craig Sheffer in it, it took me back to movies like Nightbreed and of course Hellraiser as well. So the practical effects were still there and they were still good. There was just more CGI used in this film. In terms of acting, I think this is probably the best acted film so far in the franchise, and that includes the acting in part 1. I don't mean the movie's better than part 1, but in terms of acting, this is head and shoulders above the rest of the films. Pinhead, being the face of the franchise, doesn't get any screen time, or he gets very little screen time in this film. So that's the only disappointing aspect of this movie if you're watching it as a Hellraiser fan. Luckily, I'm not a Hellraiser fan. I was just watching the movie as an individual movie. And from a detective standpoint, I think this film was actually really good. A lot better than the last film that we got. So I think get into this movie with completely negative thoughts. I came out of the film thinking that was a good film. I didn't expect to like it at all, but I enjoyed this film, and I didn't expect to say that for a movie that was straight to DVD or straight to video at the time. So overall, lack of Pinhead didn't bother me. The detective story alone and the psychological aspect and the acting kept me invested from start to finish. So at the end of the day, guys, I really liked Hellraiser Inferno. As always, guys, if you've seen this movie and if you think this movie was a welcome change, leave a comments down below, let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.